paint?
Yeah, it's right here on the table.
Good looking out.
Yeah, man. Later.
Hey guys, welcome back to It's 420 Somewhere. We have a few stories today. It's a bit of a grab bag. First story is a bummer. It is a recall happening in Michigan. So there was a laboratory that apparently kind of botched a bunch of its testings, and now there's concern that came out from the marijuana board saying that there could potentially be mold in some marijuana that's gotten out there. And it is not just a few small batches of marijuana, it's basically the entire state of Michigan. And that is a problem. That is a large amount of marijuana that they're trying to recall now. It can do actual harm to a bunch of retailers in the state. For instance, I think that the amount of marijuana they're trying to recall is about 64,000 pounds. And for reference, in the state of Michigan, in October, they sold about 24,000 pounds. So that's almost 3 months worth of marijuana that they are now trying to recall. This could actually put businesses out of business because of the huge magnitude of weed that they kind of screwed up the testing on. They're gonna retest the weed and then put it back is the plan, but still, they're suggesting to a lot of people to bring their weed back to the dispensaries, and yeah, it's a big thing. The lab really screwed up. Their statement on it is, while we strongly disagree with this decision and firmly stand by our test results, we are fully cooperating with the MRA and working closely with our customers to minimize interruptions and retest affected products at no cost. So it's a bummer for everybody in Michigan, basically, because this recalling 70% of product is not helping anybody out. And while we're on a bit of a downer, let's continue on this downer. So there are reports, we had talked about a few months ago, reports about fentanyl being in marijuana, and a lot of that turned out that it wasn't entirely true. They didn't find any fentanyl-laced marijuana. They didn't find any fentanyl in the systems of these people who were overdosing in Pennsylvania at the time. Now we're seeing reports in Connecticut that are basically saying the same thing. However, it's different because they have actually found fentanyl in the marijuana. This is the first time in the US that we're actually seeing proof that there has been fentanyl in marijuana. It's illicit weed, so it's not actually stuff that you could buy at a dispensary, but there have been overdoses because of this fentanyl-laced weed, and it's hugely nerve-wracking because the last thing we want is for this fentanyl epidemic that we're seeing to kind of get in the hands of marijuana. And I still don't understand the intention of putting fentanyl in weed. It's such a different ball game that, like, doing it strategically doesn't make much sense because you're not getting people to become more dependent on weed by putting in fentanyl. It's just too strong. The only argument that I heard that makes sense to me is that if there are dealers who are dealing with other drugs and some of that got into their weed, maybe that's the case. So it could entirely be accidental. Still, we're seeing for the first time actual proof that fentanyl has been found in marijuana. In Connecticut particularly, there have been reports since July of overdoses. Again, not all of these can be linked back to fentanyl, but in July there were 11 cases, in August there were 9 cases, September 9 cases, October there were 10 cases of reported overdoses while just consuming marijuana. We've got to watch out for this. If you're in a state that has legal marijuana but you don't want to pay the tax rate, just pay the tax rate. You know, this has always been the problem with things in the underground market. There's no testing, and while we're seeing that testing can be not entirely the most trustworthy thing, from the Michigan story, we can also trust it much more than just no testing at all. So that's where we're left at, which is the testing sucks, and without any testing, it sucks even worse. So that's the downer for today. And we're gonna jump to Pennsylvania, where kind of an interesting thing, police testing for marijuana in the system when people are impaired driving is extremely faulty because they're using tests that can trace if marijuana is in your blood system, and it has been there for weeks. So you can have smoked weeks ago and then it shows up positive for having marijuana, and then you're getting a DUI, which makes no sense at all. There was a recent bill, House Bill 900, that would tackle this, that would allow specific specifically people who have medical marijuana cards, because in Pennsylvania, only medical marijuana is legal. You wouldn't be charged for a DUI if you had marijuana in your system, because that doesn't make any sense. However, the police union reached out to some lawmakers explaining that they are concerned with this. They don't want people to be able to drive with weed in their systems and then get off scot-free. One of the co-sponsors of the bill took his name off the bill. Now the bill has been shelved, basically, because of this police union coming out and saying that they don't want this getting out there. I understand both cases. Of course, being super high and driving do not go hand in hand, but at the same time, of course, smoking weeks ago and then driving weeks later, you're absolutely fine. It makes no sense. The solution here is clearly that we just need better testing for when people are actively high as opposed to having weed in their system. And clearly Pennsylvania doesn't have that. So that's the solution here, and once that and until that happens, we're gonna be in this standstill where both sides understand their point much more than the other side. So yeah, those are 3 stories that kind of suck today. Hopefully next week we'll have some more good stories. Actually, you know what? Let's just end it with saying that Germany is about to legalize marijuana. That's gonna happen, so that's a good thing. That's good news. And that's it for this week, and we'll be back next week with more stories. See you then.